Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Jacob.
And I'm your co-host Matty, and this week we're just having a bit of a catch-up, trying to fill you guys in on what's been happening in our short but also quite long absence. It's longer than we've ever done before, isn't it? It's been about a month, I think, since we've last put out an episode, so yeah, plenty to catch up on.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks for us, which is quite weird to say because I can imagine for anybody that's been following the show, we've kind of gone a little bit dark and a little bit silent, but yeah, we had some stuff going on with our lives personally and with the idea of the infinite void. We've been kind of trying to come up with ways that we can grow it and make it a little bit cooler for everybody that listens and follows along. And hopefully, with some of the stuff that we've done and we're going to be going into explaining today, you guys will enjoy it and think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been. I know you've put together some fancy new artwork, so looking forward to seeing that going out, and I'm sure that will spruce things up a bit. But shall we start with the sort of biggest format change, which is our new spin-off show that we're launching?
Yeah, so for everybody listening, we've launched a new show, and it's called This Week on Planet Earth, and then underneath you've got From the Infinite Void, and essentially we're going to be breaking up what used to be the podcast, which was between a 40 minute to an hour discussion on a topic with a 20-minute news segment, to now the podcast will just be the topic and will remain at an hour. And then we've also got a new show that will be available only on YouTube, and that will be the news segment. And we're going to be aiming for this new show to be between 8 and 15 minutes long an episode, and it will be dropping every Saturday instead of every Friday. So now you've got 2 days worth of content from us, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so hopefully when that sort of comes out and you start to watch it, you'll be able to enjoy the longer format stuff as more like a podcast, as its own thing. And then we're hoping that the YouTube this week on Planet Earth show will be its own thing and will allow us to be a bit more sort of targeted in what we want to talk about, because I think at the moment it was at the end of the podcast and maybe people weren't getting to it and we were struggling to sort of advertise that bit of the show, because that's the topical bit that's happening that week. That's, you know, the eye candy, the clickbaity stuff, and we never really discussed it because it was sort of an add-on at the end of the show. So hopefully over on YouTube it's its own videos, it will be able to be a bit better, and people will enjoy it for its own thing going forward.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it because I'd agree with you. I found our format. I used to really enjoy our format, but I did always found that like the news segment, it kind of got kind of like swept under the rug a little bit, because as you were saying, it was towards the end of the episode, and because we weren't obviously titling the podcast episode with what the news segment was, it was kind of also getting missed too. So I feel like this way now, hopefully it kind of will cause less confusion. It'll allow for like the news segments to really be picked up and noticed by people, which is kind of the whole point of it. We want people to stay up to date with what's going on and with humanity and all the cool things we're doing. So hopefully this new show will kind of shine a spotlight on that, and then it will also allow for our podcast to be not so like timely, because another thing as well is if we have a really good episode one day or we have a really good guest, it might kind of be pigeonholed into kind of like a certain point of time with some of the news segments that we were discussing. So hopefully now that they're just topics, people would be able to listen to any of these episodes and not feel like they were living in a certain time, especially with us referencing COVID and stuff throughout the year. So that should be a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, so that, I think that's going to be a good change. And of course, feel free to sort of give us feedback and stuff on that, on all the socials. I'm sure Jacob will do this amazing job of linking all those at the end, as usual.
Yeah, it's going to be much more difficult now. I was thinking about this when we were writing down some of the scripts and doing some of the trailer stuff. I was like, I already can't remember all of our social handles, and now we've made a few more, so that'll be interesting towards the end of episodes. But Yeah, you can pretty much find it. I'm going to give you a little shout out now, and I'll do another one at the end because we need everybody to go and support the new show and check it out. But you can pretty much find it on any social media platform by typing in "This Week on Planet Earth." But if you want to find the official handles on Twitter and Instagram, it is at Twope News, which is TWOPE News. So they'll be there, and they've got their own socials as well, just because we thought if you are just a fan of the podcast and you don't want to be spammed with space and science news, then you don't have to follow that one, and you can just follow the podcast and vice versa, because we didn't want to fill all your news feeds with loads of projects on the same project. So yeah, that's what we're doing with that. But in some other little news about that, which I thought was pretty funny, is I had to learn binary code for some of the social media events. So anybody following, if you do follow the Infinite Void on Twitter, we did a little social media event where it was this whole idea that our satellite had detected a new reality, and then the narrator of the Infinite Void, which is the fancy little robot voice you hear at the beginning, accidentally opened the file, crashed the computer that controlled the Infinite Void, which resulted in a multiverse being created, and that then resulted in loads of tweets being tweeted in binary code, which sounded like a great idea when I was planning it out, but actually tweeting out in binary code was a lot more characters than I thought it would be. And then also I hadn't really thought about people replying back to me in binary code, which would then also result in me having to like figure out what they were saying. So it was fun and it was an experience. So hopefully if you saw that and you enjoyed it, well, good for you. I know a lot of people were messaging me asking me what was going on, and a lot of people were confused, but yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. And if you haven't seen it, go and see it now, because it took me ages. And yeah, it was pretty fun. But aside from that, I haven't really got much more on the new show. So we can kind of move into some more fun stuff that we've been doing whilst we've been away. But yeah, go and check it out. We're very excited that we're launching it all this week.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, in our month away, the actual Infinite Void podcast, so the usual bit that's going to be staying as it was, it's been doing pretty well. So we recently went over 100 followers on 100 subscribers, is it called?
Yes.
Followers on YouTube.
Yes, we finally got our custom link on YouTube, which is nice.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for following. I keep saying following, subscribing over on YouTube. That means a lot, and that allows us to tidy things up a bit with our with our links.
Yeah, and as well, the YouTube channel's been doing really, really well the last couple of weeks. We've been trying to figure out ways that we could grow it and get it out to you guys, because we noticed that picking a topic once a week, whilst it was fun and it allowed for like different discussions, it was becoming quite difficult to try and maintain like a full hour every week, because we were discussing something new every week. I don't know about you, but it was quite difficult. I was becoming a little bit burnt out. So we're trying to take this new approach where we do a series, and we've been trialing it with the AI series and with the simulation theory series, and the results seem quite positive from what I've seen online and from our audio downloads. I think people are finding it much easier and kind of a much better way to kind of listen to our discussions, if that makes sense, because we're kind of breaking them down and we're not being as full on in an hour, if that makes sense, which seems to be pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's true that there's only so much like time we can put into researching stuff, and when we're trying to research something new every week, it becomes quite a bit of a time sink. So it's a good way to be able to sort of spread out the workload a bit from our end. But hopefully for the listeners, what was an hour's to conversation, maybe like there's a bit of a bombardment of lots of different things. Even if you just listen to the first first episode of each series, I think we're probably going to try and keep that as a bit of an intro to the topic, so that will give people more of a way in, spread out over one podcast, and then obviously as the series go on, episodes 2, 3, and say 4 will be then bit more in depth on different topics. So hopefully people enjoy that, and it allows people to sort of get more into it easily, and then learn more, and we can hopefully do more things and more different things, which is personally it allows me to do this news show, because I'm not spending so much time every week trying to research a whole science topic.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure about the listeners, but definitely for myself, I've been able to actually learn a lot more too. I found, especially with the artificial intelligence series, because when we first started that, there was a lot of like terms I had no understanding on, like AI box and stuff. I understood about like contamination and stuff, but maybe some of the terminology I wasn't too quick with. And having each kind of bit with like the ethics of it and like the consciousness aspect of it, and like as you were saying, like the basic intro to it, all as different episodes, it actually also helped me to kind of like build a kind of like coherent argument as we were going on. So then by the time we got to the final episode, my understanding was much better than episode 1, and I was kind of able to give a bit more feedback. So I've been definitely enjoying it. So listeners, please let us know on social media if you are enjoying the series approach. I think I mentioned it at the start, but what we're going to be trying to do with each series is breaking each series up with a guest or an interview episode in between each one. So with the series, we're going to try and aim to have them between 3 and 5 episodes, depending on how big the topic. I know AI was a huge one for Matty, so we had a 5-parter, but like for instance with the simulation theory one, there wasn't really much more we could kind of do after episode 3, and it was already a little bit heady. So I think we called it there on that. But you'll also notice that between these 2 series, we, instead of having guests, we kind of just had small one-off topics. That was also because we were kind of moving into this whole new plan and this idea that we were going to execute. But going forward, kind of expect a series followed by a guest / interview followed by another series. And yeah, we'll see how we go. And depending on if you guys are enjoying that kind of approach, we'll obviously carry on. And if you're not, we can maybe look at going back to doing individual episodes each week or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I said earlier, just let us know. We always appreciate people's feedback on stuff, whether it's good or bad. So, but yeah, the simulation theory series, the one we did most recently, has been doing pretty well on YouTube and the audio, hasn't it? So I think that's some of our most listened and viewed videos. So
yeah, I think that's another really good point to make, as well as me and you, we aren't really up to date with how this YouTube business works, and that kind of makes me sound old, and I don't like it because I like being young, hip, and know what I'm doing with all this technology. But when it comes to the YouTube algorithm, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea what I'm doing with it. And every single time I think we've picked a good subject or topic that I think is going to bang across the algorithm, it maybe doesn't do so well. And then ones that we don't think are going to do so well end up doing really well. So yeah, we're also working with that and trying to figure out new ways that we can do the thumbnail, and we can also title the episodes. And I think this is also one of the reasons that has kind of led to this second show, because I, for one anyway, kind of want to work on seeing how if titling videos along with like news and stuff that's happening that day kind of benefits the video. And obviously I don't want to turn the podcast into these clickbait reels. So that's another reason why we've kind of moved for that. But in regards to, go on.
Hopefully they'll sort of grow off each other, won't they? You know, some people will come to it from the news, and some people will come to it as like a topic that they're interested in, and hopefully find the other one. So
yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. Hopefully they can kind of like piggyback off each other, and they can grow kind of in tandem with each other based off stuff that's going on. But in regards to future series, We're going to probably be hosting a poll on our social medias. So head over to probably Twitter for the poll, but I'm sure you'll be able to see the results on Instagram. But just so you guys have got kind of the idea of some of the topics and subjects that we're thinking about doing for future series, we've got humanity in the future, because I know we've had a few people online mention to us that they enjoyed the sustainable energy and cities of the future episode. So we're thinking about kind of turning that into a series and taking the approach of energy consumption, city living, transportation, and kind of doing all of it into one, which I'm sure is right up Matty's street. We're also thinking about doing one on climate change and the climate crisis, because I'm sure you guys have heard me and Matty get pretty existential towards the end of episodes. In fact, I think we probably do in most episodes, and especially in our review of 2020 with all the bad things that happened to the planet. So I think we kind of want to break it down and do a series on that, which, I don't know, I think will be really fun for us and probably depressing for anybody listening. And then we're also looking at doing a series on possibly exoplanets and looking at possible planets that humans could live on in the future, or planets that can just support intelligent life. And then we've also got one that's kind of just a bit of a philosophy deep dive, and that would be the universe's deepest questions, which I feel is a fun one, but I think we'll probably hold off on that one for a little bit until we've exhausted some of the others, because that's probably quite a heavy one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so keep an eye out on our social medias for when we drop a poll on that, and that'll probably be within the next week, as we'll be getting ready to start that one pretty soon. So if any of those sound interesting to you, make sure you go and check out our social medias and vote so your voice can be heard. But yeah, it's been a pretty crazy month, especially in some of the like space news and stuff. I mean, we've had almost we've had 4 flights now of an aircraft on a different planet since we've been away.
Mm-hmm.
And me and you, leading up to that, I think almost every week we're going on about how excited we were that there was going to be a helicopter on Mars.
Yeah, I can't believe we spent months talking about it, and the moment we went off air, it was happening.
Yeah. it kind of annoyed me, because when we were doing our like blackout on social media, they dropped the footage of it just doing its hop, and I was like, damn it, I really wanted everything to kind of like remain within theme, but I was like, I've got to share it, even if it goes against the grain. Like, even if it looks like our whole system is failing and down, we've still got to share the fact that there's a helicopter on Mars. That's got to be part of it.
But yeah, that was awesome. Some of the videos from that have been really cool. And I know you're planning to talk about the most recent flight in the news this week on Planet Earth, aren't you? So
yeah,
people can sort of head over there if they want to hear a bit more about that. But yeah, that was obviously amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the first 3 flights, you had one that it just went up and down, wasn't it? And then you had one where it went up, down, and then you've had one where it's gone up, down, and then just a little bit left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the first 3, weren't they? But awesome. I've had those GIFs on repeat. I've just been watching it and completely in awe by it. It must be like, I'm so jealous of the person that gets to fly that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's... Yes, they had a bit of a problem with it, didn't they? They were really up against it at one point with some of the coding. They couldn't get it to even work, so and they had to sort of fix some bugs when it was on the surface on Mars, which I don't think they really wanted to do, but it's worked in the end. Did you
see that photo of the rover where it looked like that famous old meme photo of Bigfoot kind of like caught in the action like that?
Yeah,
it did make me laugh. That was a good photo.
Mm-hmm.
They snapped that, didn't it, as it was flying past, kind of thing, and it was just funny.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you've caught me in the act, kind of thing.
Yeah, but yeah, on sort of one of the other topics that we were talking about very recently, the AI series that we did, a lot's been happening on that since we've been off the air as well. So for anyone that sort of wants to go and have a look into it. The EU have published, I think they had a conference and they published a big sort of white paper on it about what they're going to do with AI and how they're going to sort of regulate it and stuff going forward, which I know we've been talking a lot about in the past, about how maybe we should be thinking about these sorts of questions, and it seems like they finally got around to doing it. So,
no, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
yeah. If anyone was interested in it, a sort of lot of the things they were talking about was it's quite similar in a way to like GDPR in the set, like obviously the EU can't directly like enforce this stuff particularly efficiently, and especially like if American companies are doing it, but they hold such a big sort of presence that if they sort of demand it of people, like in the same way that demand external companies to treat people's data securely, people sort of have to go along with it, or else they miss out on like one of the most wealthy and biggest markets in the world, sort of thing. So they've got some. I think basically a lot of it is sort of areas where they're going to allow AI to be used and where they won't be. So things like automated weaponry and stuff is a big no-no, and they've got some pretty hefty fines and stuff lined up for anyone that wants to go against that.
No, that sounds interesting. Have they done any like outlinings to any of the other things that we were kind of discussing with like social engineering online?
I think they're sort of putting more like red lines down of like, we're not going to be building automatic tanks or anything like that. But then they're sort of funding think tanks and research groups to do some more of the sort of intricate stuff. So in their paper and in the sort of materials online, they talk about how they're setting up commissions and what was one of the groups they said? The Recovery and Resilience Facility, where they're going to be sort of looking into cutting edge AI and how it impacts people. And they've got these projects called Digital Europe and Horizon Europe, these sort of long-term programs where they're going to be sort of looking into some of this stuff. So this actual sort of legal side of it, I think, is more sort of fundamentals, but then they're sort of alongside that have announced a lot of funding that's going to go along into some of the more intricate day-to-day stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's a good step for where we need to be going in sort of controlling and utilizing AI. So
Cool. I was actually going to mention this to you and to our listeners, because I know they do like to hear what we've been keeping up with and watching, because me and you usually have the occasional film or documentary to recommend. Have you seen Stowaway on Netflix?
I'm sure every time you ask me something, I'm like, no, I haven't seen Stowaway.
Right. You need to watch it. I watched it on the weekend. It's new. It's only just come out on Netflix, but it's one of those films where the idea of it again, Matty, it freaked me out. It's something that I hadn't really thought about, and it freaked me out. And I won't spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but essentially it's kind of like, so you know what's, in fact, that's another thing that's been going on that we haven't really discussed. So, you know, with the Dear Moon project that they're doing, so they're selecting, is it artists? They're selecting a few artists to send to the moon, aren't they, to be inspired and then come back. So the idea for Stowaway, the film, is that you have kind of like the main pilot. So humanity has got a space program, and we've just started going to Mars. So there is a Mars colony, but there isn't many people, if that makes sense. It's just getting going.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that they're doing it is they've kind of built like a system where you've got like the pilot, and then you've got two scientists, and then each scientist has been selected for their kind of like experiment that they're going to be doing. So like for the sake of the film, you've got one girl who's just a nurse, and she's really, really good at being a nurse, and she applied as a bit of a joke, and she ends up being accepted as she's going to Mars as a nurse, and she's played by Anna Kendrick. And then you've got some other dude that's a scientist that's all about building algae that can take to the surface of Mars kind of thing and produce oxygen and so on. But it's basically this idea that they're on the way to Mars, but they get far enough where they can't turn the spaceship around because it's all about flinging it around the planet's orbit. But as they're traveling to Mars, they find that an engineer that was working on the rocket is dead on the ship. And it's kind of slipped past the health and safety. And, well, they think he's dead. Anyway, they turn out he's alive. And this causes a huge problem to the team because now there isn't enough food and enough oxygen on the ship for the 4 of them to get to Mars because there is only enough for the 3. And now they have to make a decision on whether or not they should kill the 4th guy who's only kind of alive still. And it brought up some questions that I hadn't really thought about. And it's interesting because it's not like the kind of approach where they take where it's just like, oh, well, my science matters, so who's got the most important project, who doesn't, that person's dying. It kind of takes the approach of like, who should be the one to survive, should either of us survive, but they have to make that decision because if they don't make the decision on who's going to die, then all 4 of them die. So it's interesting, and it really freaked me out. And this idea of like, because it's kind of true as well, like this idea of like traveling to Mars on this like 2-month journey, everything will have been kind of like planned and organized. And I just wonder if there is any margin of error and how possible something like that could even happen. And then if it did happen, like what a horrible situation to be in. But why I think it's also good is the science behind it is quite good, if that makes sense. Like the things that go wrong, or the things that, like some of the solutions that they have and stuff throughout the film. It's interesting, and how I thought it was going to finish, it really doesn't. So you need to go and watch it because it's all about like the psychology of the travel, if that makes sense. And I hadn't really thought about it in that aspect, and it's interesting the approach that they take. But in discussion of overcrowded areas in space, the International Space Station is actually pretty overcrowded at the moment too. I think a couple of weeks ago it had even more humans on it, didn't they, just before SpaceX brought them back this week. But I think at the moment we've got 7 astronauts on the ISS, haven't we? We've got the Akihiko Hoshihai, I can never say his name. You got Mark T, Van der Hey, Oleg Novetsky, Robert S. Kimborough, Poiter Drimavroff, Megan MacArthur, and Thomas Pesicute, I think is the way to say that. So, but there was a few more a couple of weeks ago, and the photos look scary. The amount of people that they had. Didn't they have? They got a few people like sleeping in non-sleeping quarters as well, haven't they?
Cupboards, I think was.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I bet it's like a proper little sleepover at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, one thing that I watched recently that I'll share with you was the latest Vsauce video on reasoning. It's a bit of a longer one. It's a half-hour video on YouTube, and it's sort of looks at like what reasoning is. So as a basic concept, you can either have objective sort of truths of something. You can see something and make a observation of it, sort of. Well, this laptop is black. There's no reasoning going on there.
Yeah.
Or you can observe stuff and then make a decision based on it. And Vsauce, this episode sort of he sort of describes how reasoning as we know it, which we might think of as good and is sort of like fundamental to the sort of scientific method, is sort of turning bad and is sort of running out of time of its usefulness because of the sort of world and sort of the problems we're facing. Like this idea of reasoning isn't really useful anymore.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting, and it raised a lot of sort of interesting questions that I hadn't really thought about. And just to give people a flavour of sort of what he was talking about, he was saying about how that there's this idea of like conscious bias of what is it when you stick to your own beliefs rather than confirmation bias. That's it.
Yeah.
People sort of think about it as maybe like bad, but it might have evolved to try and sort of lessen our cognitive workload. Like, let's say us two, and we're trying. Like, I think that A is better, and you think that B is better. You know, we could both go away and research both of them thoroughly, and then come back and like have a discussion. Or I could just go and research why I'm right, and you could go and research why you're right, and then we come back and just discuss that, and then try and discuss it that way.
Yeah.
And like half the amount of research that we have to do. And he was sort of talking about these ideas about like how reasoning might have evolved and what it means for trying to like tackle climate change and stuff, and sort of these big problems. So it was an interesting episode, and it's about half an hour, but yeah, people should go and check that out. It's an interesting one.
No, that sounds interesting, and I'm interested in that now, because from off the top of my head, I'd assume that the more reasoning you have would result in like the more reasoning of the outcome being bad, if that makes sense. So like the more reasoning that you would do would result in your experiences of reasoning being like worse, if that makes sense, because you'd be doing it more, so you'd just think that you wouldn't get anything from it. But I'm interested. That sounds really cool. I might actually watch that after this.
It was really interesting. There was another bit where it sort of flipped it on its head, and like I said, we tend to sort of think, oh, we observe stuff and then we decide on a reason and we make an opinion on it. But they did these experiments where humans sort of trick themselves into the reasoning they're doing, and they got like these humans to like look at pictures of two people and say, which one of these looks least trustworthy? And you go, oh, person A looks least trustworthy, and then you show another pair, person B, person A, person A, sort of thing. And then they did a trick where they put some of the least trustworthy people, the more trustworthy people, into the least trustworthy pile. And then you show them the pile again, and you say, why did you think this person was least trustworthy? And people are able to just immediately give a reason for it, even though they didn't make that decision.
That's
like
cool.
they've been your brain can just go, oh, I've made the decision, and can then just come up with a reason afterwards of why you made the decision.
That's cool.
And I was sort of thinking like, yeah, I probably do that quite a bit without realizing it.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, what is the point of that? And it's psychologists seem to think that reasoning isn't really about trying to get an answer. It's about just trying to fit in with people and do things lazily.
Yeah, that's interesting. The last Vsauce video I watched was the one where he was talking about if like darkness is faster than light. I think it was the last one I watched, and that one blew my mind. So this one sounds interesting for sure. But you've just reminded me of something I wanted to mention to you. So you know when we were having our crazy discussions on consciousness and what we thought it was, and then I think that was in our artificial intelligence series, and then we kind of moved on to simulation theory, and we discussed a little bit the idea of like what would be the purpose of reality being simulated, or what would be the purpose of consciousness being simulated. I was watching something and they were trying to describe what like consciousness was, or like what the purpose of consciousness was, and I'm going to butcher it now, but when they explained it, it was kind of like a eureka moment. I wanted to jump up and tell you about it, because we kind of were having this discussion. But because what they were basically saying was, because you know how we discussed this idea of like the wasp in the garden doesn't know it's conscious and won't be thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen to me when I die? But we are. They were talking about this idea of like, what if the meaning of consciousness is to recognize other things are consciousness? And this idea of, you know how like when humans go, this argument of, well, I don't know you're conscious. I could be the only conscious being, and you could just be behaving conscious, but you're not actually conscious. You know, that kind of argument where you might be the only conscious being. Well, they're basically saying that that's because we're still primitive. And it's this idea that truly conscious beings are able to recognize what other truly conscious beings are. Like, you're able to recognize consciousness. And they're basically saying this idea that because we can't recognize if say that the person you are talking to is conscious or not, we know that they are, but we can't like physically read your mind to be able to tell if you are or not. Our consciousness is still primitive. I just wanted to talk to you about this as an idea. I thought that was quite an interesting approach, that because we can't physically read someone's mind to tell if they're conscious or not, maybe our consciousness is still primitive in the eyes of like super consciousness. But I thought it was interesting because didn't you mention as well this idea of like consciousness is data aware of itself processing data? So you could make an argument that like super consciousness would be data aware of itself processing data and aware of other consciousnesses processing their data. So yeah, thought that was kind of cool. Hadn't heard of it that way before. I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I thought I'd mention it on the podcast.
Yeah, that does sound.
It's weird, but I like.
If we start talking about that too much, next hour.
yeah. One day we'll have a series of consciousness on consciousness. That'll be the final deep dive before me and Matty get put into an insane asylum. That'll be the final one. I'll be in one of those straight jackets trying to finish up the episode.
It's just data.
It's just data. No matter what they say, just remember it's just data. But that's pretty much it on what I've got of things that have been going on the last couple of weeks. A little bit non-science related, I guess. I've just finished WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I'm absolutely mind blown, and I'm the world's biggest Marvel geek. So anybody that's listening, if you are into the MCU or you're a bit of a comic book nerd and you've enjoyed either of those shows, please drop me a message on the socials. I will talk to you for hours because that's all I've really been doing the last couple of days. So yeah, but have you got anything else to?
No, I think that was it. It's been good catching up, and hopefully as we go into the series and get back into the swing of things, it will be good fun. Yeah,
cool. So apologies for anybody listening if this is a little bit of a shorter episode than what you're used to. Going forward, they will be at least an hour after this one, and we're going to be starting off with series and having guests on from next week onwards. So yeah, it's good to be back. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little catch-up episode, and when this goes out, it will be on the Friday. So we also have our brand new This Week on Planet Earth show dropping tomorrow. So head over to YouTube and check that out. If you want to follow us on social media, you can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Infinite Void Pod. If you would like to drop us a bit more of a lengthier email about topics or guest suggestions, you can hit us up at the Infinite Void Podcast at gmail.com. And we also have a Patreon now, so you can go and check that out. We've got 3 different groups. I think for £3 you get access to our private Discord server. For £5 you get access to our private Discord server and you get a shout out on the podcast. And then I think for £10 you get private access to a Discord server, a Patreon shout out, a Q&A with me and Matty, and you also get to suggest future episodes, which is pretty cool. So go and check that out, and then I will give our new show one final shout out. Apologies for all the shout outs. You can hit us up for This Week on Planet Earth at Twope News on Instagram and Twitter. And I think our email address is twopenews@gmail.com as well, if you want to send us any cool little news segments or articles that are happening that week. And yeah, guys, that is it. Hopefully next week the the shout outs and the list of things that you need to go and do will be a little bit more smoother. It's good to be back, and we will catch you in the Infinite Void next week. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.